Welcome back to another Final Fantasy trading card game video, and I've got some big news to share with you all. There is a Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers dual deck coming out next year, and that is super exciting because Shadowbringers is the second best Final Fantasy XIV expansion after Heaven's Ward, Don't At Me. So I'm just so excited to see that some of these characters and the different art is going to be in the trading card game. So we're going to talk about that and some of the cards that we have had hints for so far, all in this video. So look forward to it. So I'd just like to start by giving credit to FFTCG.org for all of the starter deck images, the spoilers, the text and all that kind of stuff. They are an awesome German FFTCG site, and I used to go to them all the time for spoilers because they were so on top of putting all the new set spoilers on their website, but they used to have English translations, and last time I looked they were not there, so I've started using other sources for that, but this is a really awesome website and very cool, so definitely go check that out. So this is the projected art for the box art for the dual deck, and you can see that's going to come out in February 2021, so not for a while yet. But this is still really exciting because Shadowbringers is such a big game, and the characters are so cool from that game, so definitely still very exciting. You can see that they've got Emmitt Selk and the XIII right there as the two of the featured cards, which is awesome. Those are actually going to be full art foils. The first copy of each of the playset will be, so you'll have to buy 3 starter decks to get playsets of the full arts, or you can trade with someone that is willing to part with them, but otherwise you're going to get all the unique starter cards and a full playset of all of them as per usual, and you'll get 2 50 card decks that can play against each other with varying I guess viability. Sometimes they work well as pairs, and sometimes these decks that come together do not work so well, and one of them just totally trumps the other one. But we'll see how it goes with this dual deck. So here's some of the card art that they've spoiled for us, and we can see we've got Fancred, Innocence, and the Oracle of Light, and it's really strange that they're calling her the Oracle of Light when there's 2 other names that they could possibly call her by, but they're trying to avoid spoilers, yet they chose to use this character art for the XIII. So it's one of those inconsistency things, like when the way that they labeled Lise on the other 14 starter deck, and then proceeded to do the same thing with the Hooded Man and the Man from the Moon, or whatever that card was that's definitely not Golbez. It's just a weird inconsistency that they tend to spoil some things and then try very hard not to spoil other things when they really just shouldn't worry about it at all. So taking a look, we also have some cards that they've spoiled that will be in the decks. These are the starter cards, so these cards will not be accessible in the Opus 13 set except for via the foil slot in a booster pack. Otherwise you can only get the cards in their non-foil versions here. So there's a deck that will have the good guys, and that's going to be an Earth Lightning deck, which is very interesting because the very first Final Fantasy XIV deck was Earth Lightning. And then there's going to be a bad guys deck that will have fire ice cards, and then you can see there's 5 different starter cards in that set as well. So let's take a look at each of these cards and kind of what we can predict for them. So first up we have the Oracle of Light and the XIII, and both decks in this game are going to have, or in this deck, or this starter deck, are going to have light cards. This is kind of interesting. Normally there's a light in one deck and then a dark in the other one. So the Oracle of Light will be our light card, and we can see that she's probably going to be a forward, judging from her stance. The XIII there is the cover card of the deck, so I'm assuming he's also going to be a forward. I actually can't really see many of these cards that are listed being backups, which is kind of interesting, but if there was going to be one person in the good guy deck that would be a backup, it would maybe be the XIII here. So no, I don't have too many guesses on what these cards are going to do, but I hope they have some Final Fantasy XIV synergy. Next up we have Ishtola, and there are so many Ishtolas already in the game, so I've put them all up on screen here. This one on the far left, our Opus 5 Legend, is the most popular, and for good reason. Now this is an Earth Lightning deck, so this Ishtola will be Earth or Lightning, which will mean that she might not clash with the Wind Ishtolas, and you certainly hope so, because if there is a clash, it's very, very difficult to not play the Wind Ishtola if she's accessible to your deck. So we definitely hope that she's just not at all in the same realm of deck that you might play them in. Otherwise, if it is an Earth Ishtola, it has to actually beat out the hero one from Opus 6, because that's a very, very powerful part of the Scions package, and you have to have good reason not to include it. It's basically one of your main win conditions is getting the Ishtola out, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they compete. Now, one thing that I'm wondering about is if these cards are really going to be Scions or not. So we have Ishtola, Orion J, and Fancred that are all Scions of the 7th Dawn, but in the expansion Shadowbringers, I would argue that they're not always working as Scions of the 7th Dawn. They're kind of, the focus is on a different place, a different area, and I'm kind of just reaching here for game design, that they might have other jobs that will allow them to be their own cards or have their own synergy, and not necessarily be part of a Scions deck, but they could be part of a 14 deck, which would be very cool. We only have one Orion J so far, and he's very, very specific in terms of working with monsters, so I think anything that we get will definitely have playability in a Scions deck, and it will be very interesting because if the new Orion J is a Scion and he takes the place of this one, you're really changing the direction of the deck a bit, because you had to play monsters with this one, this 2CP copy, so we'll definitely see a very different Scions deck if there's a new Orion J with a new mechanic or some sort of new text to worry about. As for Fancred, he's had better days, said James Lockwood on Facebook, and I agree, he looks pretty haggard there, and he's got some pretty good competition. All three of the Fancreds on the right are very good, and I like to play all of them. They all have their different uses and different play styles for different decks, so it's going to be really difficult to displace them. So this one, I'm really curious to see what it's going to do, and it's again, it's likely going to be a forward, but we'll just have to see. Moving on to the dark side, the bad guys deck, we've got the Light Warden Philia, which is honestly a total shock to me that this is included in the deck. This is the first dungeon boss you fight in Shadowbringers, and it is not memorable at all to me. I'm really surprised that this is a card and that they would put it in a starter deck. I would understand if this was a monster in the set, but for it to be a starter card is just beyond me, but whatever. So this could actually be a monster, it could be a forward, but we'll have to see. I'm very excited to see. I think it would be a fire card if anything, but we'll see what they end up doing with the design. Next up we have Ranjit, who is a super cool character, and I'm a big fan of him. I think that he's going to be an ice card, and I think that that he'll just be super powerful, some sort of high power forward, maybe high cost, or have, you know, some sort of a drawback for his power, but he is just such a boss in the game. He's so powerful. He can take on the Warrior of Light, so I would actually love to see maybe some anti-Warrior of Light synergy. We've seen that before, or maybe just some superpower synergy. Like, he's just very, very powerful for whatever he does. Alright, here is Emmitt Selk, and he will be familiar to most of you even if you haven't played Shadowbringers, because he's already been spoiled as a card in the Opus 12 set. So we are going to get a new copy of him in Opus 13. He'll be part of the starter deck, and this is really exciting because he is one of the coolest characters in Shadowbringers. He's a fan favorite, so I'm really excited to see. I think that he could possibly be a backup if there was going to be one in that deck, a starter backup, but I also could see him being a forward, and I'd love to see another Job Ascian if that would ever become an archetype. I don't know, but definitely very exciting. You'd have to guess that he's going to be an ice card based on this Emmitt Selk being an ice card, but you never know. Next we have Titania, which is a very interesting boss fight and a very cool card. We don't know what art they're going to use, but there's some potential for them to use some very, very beautiful art from the concept, and there's also just some illustrated art in the game that would be just absolutely amazing. So hopefully they use that. And this card, I think, has the potential to be a forward, but it also has the potential to be a starter summon, which would be absolutely crazy. We haven't had a starter summon in a long time, and I think that it's a very fine line to draw, because if it's too good, everyone needs access to it, and then that's kind of tricky. Look at Val 4 in Opus 1. But, you know, at the same time, it is very cool to have unique summons pop up, so I really hope that she is a summon. Otherwise, I think she'd probably be a forward, and I think she'd probably be a nice card. And then we have Innocence, which is going to be our light card for the bad guys deck, and this is the style of art that they have. They do have an illustration of Titania like this as well, with this style of art, and I'm assuming that her card would look like this as well, which is very exciting. So this guy, I think will just be a forward, and I'm wondering if he's going to be super high cost, because he's kind of like a big boss in the game, so I'm very curious to see how they cost him, what kind of effect they give him, because he could be a very high cost light card, and that's definitely an exciting thing. And that's going to be it for the preview of the two-player starter set for the Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers Opus 13 deck here, and it's honestly great news. I know that we already have two Final Fantasy XIV starter decks, but you know what? It's just such a popular game. It's got a great chance to bring in new players that want to collect these cards, play with these cards, try out the game. So I'm super excited for it. But I want to know what you have to say on the deck and all the cards. Were my speculations way off? Do you think they're just going to go Scions? What do you think the possible effects could be on these cards? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you next video. Thank you so much for watching this video. You can show your support with a like and subscribe, and by checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/MassidiaGaming. Please be sure to also check out Cards of Evilise for all your FFTCG singles and product needs. And I'd also like to thank FFDecks for creating a fantastic website that we use every day. Until next time, keep it real, Massidians.